Hello and welcome to Culture Over Coffee, a podcast focused on improving company culture and fostering employee engagement. Every week we chat with experts and thought leaders about the latest information and proven practices you can use to reduce regrettable turnover, increase productivity on your team, and retain key customers. So pour a cup of your favorite brew and join us. I'm your host, Beth Sunshine, SVP at Up Your Culture and the Center for Sales Strategy. In this episode, we're thinking about how leaders can utilize the full potential of their role to help shape the culture of their company. And we could think of no better person to speak to this topic than Donna Hall, SVP General Manager at Robertson Lowstuter. Donna offers great insight about why leaders who talk more than they listen are culture killers, how clearly communicating your company's vision comes in the form of a steady drumbeat, and finally, why giving someone feedback is the best way to show them that you care about them, and in turn, why the lack of feedback tells them that you don't. So hi, Donna. I am so glad you could join me today for Culture Over Coffee.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So just as a little setup for why I've been especially looking forward to our conversation, I had the true pleasure of working with you for many years. You were leading CMG, Cox Media, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We met a long time ago, and it was clear to me the very first time that we met at one of your annual manager meetings. You probably don't even remember it. But it was so clear to me then how much you deeply cared about your people, how much you care about your workplace, creating a culture where your people thrive. So now you run one of the top executive coaching and career transition firms in the country. And I was thinking you're able to not just influence your own organization, but now you're able to influence all of the organizations that hire you. So you have a really broad scope of understanding, and you are most definitely one of the strongest leaders I know. So just to clarify why I've been so excited to talk to you, I'm really looking forward to this. Oh, all right, so you ready to get started?
I am looking forward to it.
Good. All right. So we'll start with just a good level set question. From your experience in executive coaching, how would you define the role of leadership when it comes to shaping a company's culture?
Well, so first, every company has a culture. Mm-hmm. So if leadership doesn't define the culture that they want and shape it, it will get created in the vacuum that exists in leadership's absence. So it's either shaped by leadership or it's shaped through employees. Leadership can shape it through thoughtful strategy, executed plans, or employees do that through their own day-to-day actions with one another or to one another. So it really is leadership's role, if they want it, through their own strategy and thoughtful executed plans.
It's a really good point that it's going to happen anyway. The question is, are your leaders going to take control of it? I was actually, I watched a video, and now I'm not going to remember who the speaker was, but I was really taken by what he said. He said that if a culture is strong, when new people come into the organization, the culture remains strong. But if the culture is weak, when new people come into the organization, the culture becomes the new people. And that's kind of what I'm now hearing you say is if left to its own devices, the employees in their day-to-day actions kind of make your culture.
That's absolutely right. They fill that vacuum. They fill the void left by leadership's inattentiveness, the lack of a strategy. They'll fill that strategy themselves. Yeah. Absolutely.
Fascinating. I'm glad you mentioned that. So I know it's not always easy creating a culture, shaping a culture. So what are some of the common challenges that leaders face when they're trying to influence a company culture from the beginning or even change a company culture over time? And then how can they overcome those challenges?
I think some of the most challenging issues are when employees don't buy in, and they don't buy in a subversive way. When it's not open rebellion, or it's under the surface and it's not out there. To me, that's one of the most difficult challenges, when it's not overt. Their efforts are not overt and it's really passive. I think that's a challenge, because you've got to bring that out. You have to find out where it's coming from, and you have to find a way to address it. That to me is the challenge, because when it's pushed down, you have to bring it up and out and address it. You can't just allow it to remain hidden, because you can't change the culture if it's just being pushed down and not talked about, and subversively being pushed down. Yeah. I prefer to talk about it and bring it out into the sunlight so it can be dealt with. And I also like to follow chain of command. So you have to find out where it's coming from, and you have to follow that chain of command to bring it out into the sunlight. So as soon as it's clear what's happening in the organization, and there are documented, observable issues and behaviors, it has to be addressed by the appropriate leaders. You can't just let those things continue, because that eats an organization up. It's a chronic, insidious thing, and it destroys organizations from the inside out.
That's right. It's like a building crumbling from the bottom level.
Yes.
Yeah. So thinking about, the good cultures we want to have, that strong foundation, in your opinion, what exactly should leaders be looking for? What traits or behaviors should they embody to create a positive and productive company culture?
Well, I think there are many. If I were going to point to a foundational top one, it would be to listen. I think many times leaders get to the point in their career where they've gotten to the top, or they're in the upper echelons of either their organization or their career, and they think, or they've begun to believe the hype that they're so uber smart that they must impart their wisdom on everyone, and they must bestow their pearls of wisdom all of the time, and they start talking, and they stop listening to everyone around them. They just talk. And they talk more than they listen, and it's a culture killer. And it also really, frankly, makes them look like Nimrods. Can I use that word?
Sure.
But it does. But if you listen, like truly listen, it connects you to the people. You learn about them. You learn what matters to them. It demonstrates that they matter. It helps you hear what is important to the organization. You hear what is important to them. It also helps connect you to them as a person. Listening is the great connector. It's also really important to remember that you're never the smartest person in the room about all things. And if you just stop and listen, you can always learn something from somebody that you didn't know before in a room. And it's a humbling thing. And a little humility goes a long way. And to me, if you stop and listen throughout the day, it's one of the best things you can do as a leader. It is the great connector. It is the great humility gift giver. And it is a culture builder all day long.
I love that, especially when so many leaders that I coach believe it's their job to do the talking. And I think you explained that so well. They believe, in some cases it's ego, right? They've risen to the ranks and they, but in some cases they think, if I'm the leader, I need to be directing. And
yes.
I love that you flipped that around, because listening is so key. And of course, it plays a significant role in effective communication in general. We talk a lot about two-way communication, and listening obviously is one of those ways. But let's let's stay in the realm of communication and
Yeah.
just get a little bit more specific and talk about the company's vision. So how can leaders effectively communicate their vision, that cultural vision, to their people, to employees at all levels of the organization, so that everyone shares that vision and is really on the same journey together?
Yes. So no matter the size of the organization, big, small, medium, global, domestic, it doesn't matter. I think it's important to realize that we all absorb information very differently. The platform, whether you learn audibly or visually, or it doesn't matter. We all learn it differently. So we need to communicate the vision in every way we possibly can so people can absorb it in the way that they learn most readily and most permanently, I guess I should say. Every platform possibly, and over and over and over. I call it the steady drumbeat, like this, over and over. It's not you say it once and like, okay, we said it. There's the vision. Like, it has to be over and over and over and over and over throughout the organization. And if we're using all the platforms possible, each employee will feel more like it's tailored to them. Like, oh yeah, they wrote that exactly for me. And we have to use many different kinds of graphics, many different kinds. It can't just be one way. And if we think about marketing it like a marketing campaign to our employees, like we would market to our clients or to our consumers, that's the way we should think about our vision. That's the way we should think about our cultural campaign. It's a marketing campaign to our employees that we want them to not just buy into, we want them to be part of. We want our employees to build our culture with us. Culture isn't just handed down from on high, from the leadership team. It's what we all want to do together. Yes, it's our vision, our leadership vision, but we want you to be part of it with us. We're building it together. And that has to be done through multiple avenues to reach everybody where they are.
I love that concept. So you talked about how different people absorb information differently and how you need to reach people in the way that's most effective for them. Love the multiple platforms, love the drumbeat, the focus on frequency. And you used a word, I think, that deserves a little spotlight, and that is tailoring. People would hear it and feel like you tailored it for them. That requires some significant emotional intelligence. So let's touch on that.
Yes.
What role would you say emotional intelligence plays in leadership? And
Yeah.
second part to that, can you share maybe some specific examples of emotional intelligence in action, telling us a little bit about how they impact the overall workplace environment?
Well, so I think emotional intelligence is a critical area. In my work and our company at RL, we use an assessment called the EQI. It's for executives to help leaders know and understand their areas of strength and development in regards to emotional intelligence. So to be clear what emotional intelligence is, first, having high EQI means you have high self-awareness. And having self-awareness, high self-awareness, is critical to be a really good leader, to know who you are and who you are not, and the impact you have on other people is really important. What behaviors you have and what your behaviors impact is on other people is really important to be a very good leader. Having high emotional intelligence also means you manage yourself well. So knowing how your behavior impacts other people is one thing, but managing those behaviors is something entirely different. So just having self-control and managing yourself well is something very, very important. Having high EQI also means you have high social awareness and relationship management. So all of these things go hand in glove with outstanding leadership. So if you can envision a world in which the leader and his or her leadership team all have high emotional intelligence, just think about what their culture might be. If they understand themselves, if they manage themselves well, if they have great social relationships and social engagement, think of what that culture might look like. They're equally responsive to themselves as a leadership team and to one another. It makes me think of that Coca-Cola commercial from back in the 70s. It just, like the age.
Yeah,
exactly. Everyone is singing, and like that would be a really lovely organization. When we're thinking of others, our impact on others, and they're thinking about their impact on me and you, that's a really lovely place to work.
Yeah, it's really high level thinking. I think it's, the lowest base level thinking is knowing who you are. I love that next, knowing who you are and being able to change that to different things and being able to know your audience and what they need from you. Now we're getting really complex.
Well, we are. And when you think as leaders about hiring executives, there are tools like the EQI that you can have people assessed for what their emotional intelligence is, what their strengths are, what their workarounds are. You can know when people come in, do they have high emotional intelligence? Do they not? Where are they good? Where do they need some help? You can build a leadership team with high emotional intelligence. You can also look at your current executive team and say, we need to get better. If your current emotional, if your current emotional intelligence is not great, you can do something about that. You can grow in emotional intelligence by knowing where you currently are and work to get better.
I love that. Inside the business world and outside the business world. In life in general, what a magical thing to really understand who you are and how your read is on others, how you come off to others, how you can adjust. I think that EQI is a fascinating assessment. And I like the part about being able to grow it. You aren't necessarily who you are. It's not like, oh, sorry, I have low EQ. Okay, well, let's do something about that. Let's improve that leadership.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right. So at Up Your Culture, we work with a broad spectrum of organizations. So we work with, on one hand, companies that are striving to take their culture from good to great. On the other end of that spectrum, we work with organizations that have deeply, deeply fractured cultures, and they need to make significant changes. And what I've learned on either end of the spectrum, it doesn't matter. It takes a really strong leader and a strong leadership team to make that happen. I like the way you said that culture isn't handed down on high. It's something that pervasive to the whole organization. I totally agree. But I would also say that you have to have strong leadership to keep it on course, to make it a priority. So I'd love to hear, did you have any examples of leadership intervention that resulted in good stuff happening, a significant cultural shift within an organization?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, I began working at a fairly large organization that was very siloed from department to department. It was as if it wasn't one company. It was as if it was 8 different companies under one umbrella. Departments didn't talk to one another. No departments knew another department's goals. They didn't meet together. It really honestly was like 8 different companies, disjointed and frankly unsuccessful. So the leadership team began crafting a strategy for one company. how we would de-silo the organization through company-wide meetings, weekly company-wide communication filled with information that was pertinent to all. We began sharing department goals, how we were successful or not meeting the goals, began meeting as a department head team together. We began celebrating one another, a lot of management by walking around, by the leadership team, getting to know one another. I mean, it was a full-on leadership team strategy executed by all of us to bring the entire organization together, a large organization. We were shocked by how it was embraced, not just by the leadership team, but by the entire organization, the whole staff, how hungry they were for community within their company, how little time it took to de-silo. This was a company that had been this way, this siloed for decades, Beth.
Wow.
I would say it took us about a year to de-silo after. Yeah, it was astounding, actually. And I would say probably one of the biggest accomplishments of my career with a leadership team in taking what was a culturally broken organization and transitioning it into something that felt really good as a team together.
Huge accomplishment. And thank you for sharing that. I'm impressed. It takes time. Every culture initiative takes time. We typically say that a true culture change takes about 18 months on average. 12 months tells me that you had a great plan, you had great leaders in place, and that you were all working together, which is what you specifically said. Fantastic to hear. So let's bring in the concept of change. So, at different times, organizations experience different levels of change. It seems like more now than ever, and maybe it's just me, the organizations I work with are more in a constant state of change. So I think this is even more pertinent maybe than it has been in the past. But how can leaders maintain a strong company culture, the kind of culture you ended up with in the end that you felt so proud of? How can you maintain that over time during rapid periods of growth, during rapid periods of change, maybe even during a crisis? What strategies have you found most effective in those situations?
Well, I think you have to be intentional. And I would say not just during change or rapid growth or crisis. I think you have to be intentional during just status quo. If you put things culture on the back burner, it's lost really quickly. It just is. Because life happens, life moves. And if you don't want your culture to become something you don't want it to be, then you have to be intentional about it. And I think you have to recognize it's not yours alone. As we were talking about before, you are the leader. You are the captain of it. Right. But you have plenty of lieutenants, and they have a role in all of it too. And you have to determine what their role is. And you have to delegate that. So ensure they're on the same page. What is your strategy? What's their part of the strategy? What are all of those roles? Enlist them in the culture strategies, whether it's a time of change, whether it's a time of crisis, whatever that is, enlist them in the culture strategies as you would during times where it's not rocky. But who's your team? Who's your culture team? What's your role? What's their role? And be intentional. What's your action plan? What are your goals? Are you meeting your goals? Celebrate your goals, just like any other operational plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not a separate entity. It is part of, or just like, your operational plan. So how does feedback play into that? How important would you say feedback is in shaping and maintaining a company culture? And any best practices you would share for either giving or receiving feedback along the way?
Well, feedback to me, along with setting and managing expectations, is sort of the bedrock
Hmm.
of culture. It's one of the most crucial things that we can do for our employees. That's positive and critical feedback. I think we have an onus to our employees to give feedback. It's a responsibility. I don't know how else you grow employees if you're not talking to them about their strengths and their workarounds. I don't know how you effectively grow your next generation of leaders if we're not giving them feedback frequently. More importantly, how do we grow our next generation of leaders if we don't teach them how to give feedback and receive feedback? I mean, it is, again, to me, it's just the bedrock. It's foundational. If you don't have that, the house you're building, the business you're building crumbles. It's not just cultural. That to me is operational excellence, all in one critical element. Feedback is both things. Yes, cultural, good or bad, depending on the kind of feedback that you're giving or not giving, but it's operational excellence or not, all wrapped up into that one foundational element.
Well said. And I think even with the best of intentions, it's an area that most leaders could get better at. The hard part, I think, of feedback, there's a million hard parts to it. But the hardest part is you have to actually observe the person, observe the behaviors to be able to give really good feedback. And, time is always the enemy, and it's hard for a lot of leaders to make the time or take the time to be able to invest in people that way. So
Hey,
I'm
Beth,
really glad you spotlighted that. Yeah.
Yeah. When you don't spend time with your people, you know what you're saying to them?
Tell me.
You don't matter to me. And you know what you say when you say you don't matter to me? You're killing your culture. It goes right back to culture. If you're not doing one-on-ones, or you're not spending time with salespeople in the field, or you're not whatever those things are for you in your organization, when you're not spending one-on-one time with your people, you're actually telling them they don't matter to you. Nothing will kill a culture faster than people feeling like they don't matter. They want that more than big fat paychecks. Everybody wants a big fat paycheck, but more than that, they want to know that they matter, and they want to know very specifically how. That's how the feedback comes in. Very specifically, how do they matter? That's where the strengths come in, but it's also how the weaknesses or the workarounds come in. Because if you tell them how to get better, you're saying, I care so much about you. I'm going to tell you this is how you grow. That's how we demonstrate that we care. I care enough about you that I'm going to pour myself into your development areas. That's how I show you I care and that you matter.
And that's why
culture.
You're such a good leader. That right there, that is the headline for me. That is why I get out of bed every day. And I love the way you just said that. Amazing. All right. So on that note, last question.
Yes,
if you could give just one piece of advice to leaders who are wanting to play a larger role, they're hearing you and they're wanting to shape their company's culture, what would that one piece of advice be?
You have to have a plan. It cannot be happenstance. You have to have a real strategy, like you would have a real strategy to grow revenue or to reduce expense or to grow EBITDA, but you have to have a real strategy. If it's important to you, you will have a plan for it, like a business plan. It's part of your business plan. If you don't know how to do that, there are experts out there. There are rumors that there are companies out there that do this. There's shockingly enough.
Maybe find one or one.
You can make probably, but you have to have a plan for it. It has to be intentional.
Yeah,
that's my advice.
That's great advice. Really good advice and a wonderful way to end this conversation. I want to thank you for spending time with me today talking about culture over coffee. Although I don't have my coffee with me today. You do. There you go. You shared some great information, and I know our listeners will find this extremely valuable. So for those listening, if it's okay, Donna, I'd love to drop your LinkedIn information down in the show notes.
Yes, please.
Then people can connect with you, learn more about RL, the kind of coaching you do, things like the EQI. So I think that would be handy. I'm also going to add, for those listening, I'll add a link that you can use to grade your company culture as it stands today. So it's an interactive quiz, pretty quick and easy, takes a few minutes. But what will happen is it'll give you a good sense of your culture's current health, and just in an automated way without interacting with a human, it'll give you some recommendations that might be a good starting point for you if you're wanting to shape your culture. So thank you to our listeners for joining us today. And Donna, thank you so much for the fantastic insights. I loved it.
Thank you for having me. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on Culture Over Coffee. If you've enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and join us for every episode. For more helpful information on the topics of company culture and employee engagement, visit us at upyourculture.com.